Right, let's create some accessories. I have some ideas here in the reference folder. Maybe let's get started with this copper tea kettle. I'm going to start in an empty 3D scene. I'm going to set up a background image in my front viewport. Let's start with creating a profile line. I'm going to roughly trace the outline of the kettle. Like that, and adjust the vertices. Let's use the Bezier handles here to create this rounded part. Alright, add some Bezier handles over here, and fillet some of the sharp edges. Right, then add the lathe modifier. Okay. And let's increase the segments to 32 or so, maybe even more. Let's try 48. Okay. I'm not gonna make these too detailed. Let's make this nose here. Let's start with a line. Give it a rectangular profile. Actually, let's make it square. Okay, let's start at 15 by 15. Collapsed editable poly. And scale these edge loops up like this. Make the transition gradual from the fat beginning to thinner end. Alright. Look at it closer, and that's fine. Collapsed editable poly. Delete the top polygon and the two on the back side as well. Okay, and now I'm gonna add the turbo smooth modifier. And another edit poly on top of the turbo smooth. And finally, let's adjust the shape of the snout a bit like this. Might be a bit too large. Let's scale this part down. It doesn't matter, I don't want to spend too much time on it. Okay, let's add a shell modifier to give it some thickness. Create the segments to 2 and turbo smooth. So that's the snout. Now let's create the handle. Alright, let's start with a box. Make a thin box over here. convert to editable poly. Add some more edge loops here. Okay, add some edge loops and adjust the shape sort of like this. Right. Let's add another edge loop in the center here. And add some edges to the sides to make them sharper. Just add 2 segments and pinch them out like this. Okay. Turbo Smooth. Maybe let's scale this part thinner like this. And this one a bit thicker. Alright, perfect. Move to the center. Now let's create another line. Like that. And change the dimensions to something a bit thinner. Okay, like this. Perfect. Let's collapse to editable poly. And taper it gradually like this. Alright. I'm gonna get rid of this diagonal edge and add some more segments along these side edges just to keep this part sharper after turbo smoothing. So like that. Okay. And one more. Actually, let's add 2 segments here as well. Right, turbo smooth. Looks good. Let's increase the iterations to make it smoother. Make a couple of spheres over here. Okay. Now let's make a cylinder and a sphere over here. So the cylinder should be a bit higher. Should have less height segments and it should be a bit rounder. Okay, let's add one more cap segment and collapse to editable poly. And finally I'm gonna round this edge loop here. Right, smooth it. And mirror to the other side. I'm going to group this part together and use the mirror tool to make an instance on the other side. Okay, good. And let's make the handle. I'm going to start with a line like this. I'm going to adjust the profile and use the lathe modifier on the x-axis. Right. It's a bit too thick. Okay, let's leave it like that. Increase the interpolation steps to make it smoother, and add symmetry. Just flip it and move over here. Perfect. Okay, and I'm gonna scale the cylinder slightly smaller. Right, finally let's make this wooden knob on top. Just make a profile and adjust it with the Bezier corners. And light. Pretty simple. Looks like this one is inside out. Yep, that's good. I think I'm gonna scale this part down slightly. Alright, and that's fine. Let's make the materials for it. So let's create a multi-sub material. Set the number of materials to 3. And start with the first one. It's gonna be a copper material. Let's name it copper. Let's look at a reference image. So the darkest part is dark brown, slightly red. So let's use that as our diffuse color. I think it's something like this. Okay, good. And now the brightest color should be used in the reflection slot. I think it's something like this. Right. Let's change the BRDF to Word and blur it a bit. Okay, good. Enable Fresnel. Let's set it to 80 maybe. Okay, good. And change this copper material to V-Ray Blend. Keep all material as sub-material. Copy to the code slot. And here I'm going to use perfectly clear reflections. Like this, maybe 0.99 or so. Alright. Change the blend them out slightly. And I think that's fine. So this is going to be our copper. It looks pretty much like this. And now we need to create a dark material for the iron. Okay, change it to multi-sub. Okay, second material will be iron. Set it to dark color, like 4 maybe. Get some weak reflections, blur them a bit. Enable Fresnel, and let's set it at 4 as well. Okay, and I'm gonna use a cellular map in the bump slot. I'm gonna increase the size. And I'm gonna invert the bump by using a negative value here. Let's try -10. And that's gonna be the iron. And finally the wood material. Okay. I'm just gonna grab that from our kitchen scene. So there's our scene. Let's look at the materials. And here's our chair material. I'm gonna drag and drop it. Right. Get the chair material, drag the wood out. And I'm gonna use it in the third slot. Just drag and drop. Okay. I'm gonna collapse this whole thing to editable poly. And attach it together. Right, and now let's set all the elements to have the correct material IDs. Starting with 1. Actually, let's set everything to 2 since most parts are from iron. Set the main body to copper, and these two handles to wood. Okay, perfect. And that's the kettle. Let's save it as kettle. Right, next up, let's make this espresso maker. I'm gonna adjust the image slightly so it's not so bright and white. It's a bit hard to see some new objects you're creating in Max if the background is white. So I'm gonna bring down the brightness slightly and resave it. Okay, let's make a new file and change the background image to our espresso maker. Again, I'm not gonna try and make it perfect, I'm gonna just create something similar to this. Let's start with a star for this main part. Okay, and let's increase the points. And the second radius, like this maybe. Right, collapse to editable spline. Make sure all the vertices are corner. And I want to round all of these outer ones. Okay, and use the fillet tool to do that. Okay, perfect. And let's weld all the vertices together. Okay, perfect. Rotate upwards, scale smaller, and extrude. Alright, let's collapse to editable poly. Add some segments and pinch them out like this. Okay. Now I'm gonna select these top and bottom parts, and I'm gonna extrude them a bit by using local normals. Just a tiny bit. And set the material ID to a different one. Let's set it to 2 and set the rest to 1. Right, let's create a new multi-side material. Looks like we need about 3 materials for this as well, so let's set it to 3. And the first one will be chrome. Actually, you can just pick that. Right, let's create a new chrome material. It's a dark diffuse color, very intense reflections, and Fresnel at 100. Okay, and that's the chrome. And the second material will be black plastic. So again, dark diffuse color, weaker reflections, maybe set it to 2.5 or so. Okay, and let's blur it to 0.98. And that's fine. Okay, good. Just gonna flatten this part out. And same on the bottom. Right, and let's make this round cap now. Just the shape with bezier handles. And lathe. Okay, let's go and convert to editable poly, but first I'm gonna fill it this one little vertex. And maybe this one as well. Alright, check the normals. If it's shiny, the normals are correcting your way. If it's flat, they're inverted, so that's a good guideline you can use to see which way they're pointing. Right, collapse editable poly, and add the shell modifier. And that's going to be the glass part. Let's set up the third material. I'm just going to pick glass from my kitchen scene. And assign it. Alright, it already has the correct ID. Okay, let's make a sphere on top. And using the FFD 3x3, and let's use FFD 4x4. You can adjust the shape like this. Collapse to editable poly, position in the center, check the material ID, and assign the material. That's good. Now let's make the base. I'm going to start with a cylinder. Rotate it like this. Let's make the segments a bit fewer. Let's say 12 maybe. Unhide all. And maybe let's try the symmetry modifier. Okay, first I'm gonna convert to editable poly and scale the top part a bit smaller. Add the segment here and round it out a bit like this. Okay, that's good. And add the symmetry and move it over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse to editable poly and just scale this part a bit smaller. I'm not trying to make a super accurate copy, so I'm not too concerned with the exact shape. Alright, we need to add some edges to top and bottom to make them a bit sharper. And turbo smooth. Okay, that's good. Let's add the materials. Okay, change the correct material ID. So that's number 1. Just for now, I'm going to change the color of the chrome to a bit brighter gray, so we can see if everything's correct. Alright, that's good. Now let's make this part. Okay, just a simple line with a light modifier. Now let's fill it this. Alright, and lathe. Let's move it to center. And some of these legs or something like that. Just gonna create a circle, convert to editable poly, convert to editable spline, delete the bottom segments, and give it I'm going to give it a radial profile. Make it a bit smoother by increasing the interpolation steps, and that's fine. Let's make a rotated copy as well. Okay, let's make this handle now. Let's make a simplified version. So one cylinder made from a line. A simple profile line like this. I'm gonna fill at the sharp corner. As well, and lathe it. Make sure you change the lathe axis and move it downwards. We have to move these parts. good, I think. Flip the normals, that's good. And let's make some spheres. Just gonna make one and add some symmetry modifiers to create the rest. Okay, perfect. Let's scale it a bit smaller and move to the center of the handle. Right, let's assign the materials. Okay, all these parts are chrome. Fix the material ID. Okay, good. And it needs some sort of screws or something over here. I'm just gonna create some spheres. And copy to the other side. That's good. Okay. Move the handle in place. Let's group this part together and rotate it. Okay, perfect. Let's copy the handle down. Let's scale this smaller and move in here. That's good. What else? We need this connector and this thing over here. Let's start with the connector. I'm going to copy this object here, make a copy, collapse editable poly, and let's select these polygons. Okay, good. Let's extrude them. Gross your selection, invert it, and delete. Perfect. Again, I'm gonna delete the other end as well. And I'm gonna add a few segments over here. Maybe pinch them out a bit and slide to the center of the visible part. Alright, and finally I'm going to select this edge loop and I'm going to scale it down like this. And turbo smooth. So now it's going to be that. Maybe let's adjust the shape slightly with FFD 3x3 modifier. Let's make it slightly rounder. It's a bit hard without messing up on this part here. Oh well, I think that's fine. Doesn't matter. Don't want to waste too much time here. Okay, let's hide everything and create this part. So let's lathe a cylinder. Make a line, adjust it slightly, fill at the top corner. Delete the central segment and fill at the bottom corner as well. Okay, add lathe, move the center point, that's fine, and cap the holes. Looks good. And let's create a cylinder now. Actually, we can just create a line and give it a radial profile. No need for a cylinder. It's a bit quicker this way. Right, adjust the size. Convert to editable poly. And Shift plus scale it down to make a copy on the inside. Okay, so I'm going to create another copy and move it downwards. And these three parts will be made from glass. So let's set the correct material ID. This part should be chrome. Okay, let's move it out a bit and add a couple of more lines here. Good. Well, let's make this dial. Okay, this time I'm going to start with the cylinder. Convert to editable poly. I'll select these inner vertices, I mean the polys, and insert them like this. Okay, let's extrude it inwards. Scale down a bit. Okay, sorry. Now from the side view, let's increase the width like this. Add the edge loop along the center. And scale it upwards. Now I want to make sure these edges stay sharp after turbo smoothing, so select them and loop them and chamfer them. Finally, add the turbo smooth. Right. And now we need a little piece of glass in the center. Let's use a circle for that. Disable the profile and extrude it a bit. Okay. Let's give it the third material ID. And then assign the material. Right, and so this body part should have the first material ID. Right, and let's make a dial in the center. just a sphere in the center and a box coming out from the sphere. And move those out a bit. And they already have the correct material ID, so that's good. Just gonna rotate the dial slightly. And now select this whole thing, group it together. From the top view, rotate it 90 degrees and move in the correct position. Actually, let's rotate it back 45 degrees and move over here. And that's our espresso maker. Just a little adjustment over here. Okay, I'm gonna select these inner polygons, scale them upwards. Okay, let's move these out of the way. And extrude this part inwards a bit. Let's insert it a bit, a couple of times, so it stays nice and sharp after turbo swing. Alright, and that's the espresso maker. Group and save the file. Okay, let's make a new file and create some utensils to hang above the stove. Okay, so something like this maybe, or like this, or maybe like this. I'm going to use this image as my reference. Go to Max. Again, change the viewport background to your correct reference image. And let's make some of these. I'm going to start with a line like this. Alright, now let's convert it to editable poly. Flatten out the right side. And cut in some edges to connect the vertices to something. And add symmetry. That's a nice start. Collapse editable poly. And let's extrude these edges down. Extrude, scale larger, extrude again, scale again, and down. Alright, let's look at it from the side. So this part should go out a bit. Let's give it a gentle curve. Actually, Now let's insert this central part here. Let's just collapse it. Collapse it and move the single point inwards. And now we can connect these edges. And adjust the shape by adding some more edge loops. Okay, let's weld these vertices together. Alright, it's just a single vertex, so no need for that. And add the shell modifier. Okay. Maybe let's set the amount slightly smaller and try turbo smoothing. That's a nice ladle. Now let's make a copy. And let's make a cup this time. Okay, so that's gonna be the handle. We're gonna create a sphere, rotate it upwards, collapse to editable poly, and delete all these top polygons. Finally scale it down to flatten it. Alright. And position over here. Add shell. And maybe turbo smooth it a bit. That's good. Let's make another one. Let's make this one. Make a copy. Go down here. Extrude somewhat like this. Alright. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an edge loop here. And one along the bottom of these cutouts. Okay. Actually, let's just cut them out with booleans. No need to make it complicated. Now let's just make a rectangle around the corners. And extrude it. Alright, collapse to editable poly. And make a few copies over here. Let's cut out 4 holes. And see how that looks. Right, collapse the subject to editable poly. Go to compound objects, pro boolean, and cut out these pieces. Okay, that's good. Let's make one more. So let's modify our spoon maybe for this one. Okay, let's scale this part a bit wider. this one as well. And let's extrude these parts out. Convert the selection to vertices by control clicking right here. Maybe scale it outwards. And I'm gonna scale these down and delete them. Alright, that's fine. Maybe let's use the shell modifier to make it thicker. And what else? Now let's make one of these with the round cutouts, or maybe this thin one. Maybe let's make something like that thin object. Okay, I'm gonna copy the handle, make it much shorter. And extrude the bottom part. Scale it up, extrude again. And round end. Okay, a bit too rounded. Let's add some support edges, slide them downwards. This will make the bottom part sharper. And to make the top part sharper, we need to slide up. Okay, good. And from the side view, let's rotate this whole thing like this. Right, and let's make all of these pieces made from copper. Just copy the copper material out in another slot and assign it. Actually, these are already just single objects, so that's fine. Let's make this rail on which they hang. First, let's make a hook. So let's start with the rail. Start with a circle. I'm gonna make it a bit differently. I'm gonna make it with a nice profile. And just make a line, somewhat like this, and fill in these corners. And I'm gonna add the lathe modifier. Alright, that's fine. Rotate it upwards, actually downwards. And copy to the other side. And now let's create the rail itself. I'm going to use a simple line with rounded corners. And I'm going to give it a radial profile. Let's make sure it's centered correctly. And here as well. Okay, move up. Let's cap the holes. Maybe let's make the line a bit thicker. Right, let's give it a chrome material. And finally the little hooks. I'm just gonna make a shape like this. Hit rectangular profile. And turbo smooth it. Okay, let's hide the background. Move this whole thing upwards. And forward. I think it needs to be a bit thicker. So maybe let's set it to 3.5 by 3.5. And that's fine. Alright, assign the raw material and make a few copies for the rest of the objects. Right, and that's the rail with the cooking utensils. Let's group it together and save. Let's make some dishes to put in the shelves and cabinets. Maybe let's start with an oil bottle we can put next to the oven. Let's start with this. Let's use a reference image again. And let's trace the shape. I'm gonna trace it like this. And I'm gonna turbo smooth it later. Alright, that's the basic outline. Let's lathe. And make sure the center points meet up. Okay, good. It's turbo smooth. Okay, set the iterations to 2. Let's make the cork. I think the top part is a bit too thick. Let's move these vertices inwards. And let's make the cork. I'm just going to use a simple line with radial profile and make it thicker. Collapse and adjust the size like this. So that's going to be the cork. And the line on top like this. Collapse editable poly. Delete the top polygons and add shell. Okay, that's fine. Now let's create the oil inside the bottle. I'm just going to duplicate the bottle itself. I'll make a copy and go down to my original line and delete some of the segments. Okay, so now only this part is left. Actually, let's do it differently. Let's duplicate the object and add an edit poly modifier above the turbo smooth. Finally, select some of these polys, delete them, and delete the outer element as well. Next, I'm going to scale it down slightly, just so it's not on the same plane as the bottle itself. So let's scale it down to 99.99. Isolate it. Collapse editable poly. Looks like it might be inside out. Let's flip the elements. Okay, looks better. And then I'm going to select the outline and I'm going to scale it downwards while holding the shift to extrude it. And again. Right, let's select this edge loop, actually edge ring. Connect and slide like this. And finally select these edge rings and move down to make this sort of rounded transition here along the edges. I'm just going to chamfer it to round it even more. Okay, cap the holes, add the smooth modifier, and that's the oil object. Let's create some quick materials for this. I'm going to create a multi-sub. Where is it? Right, multi-sub material. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4 materials. Let's set it to 4. Okay, the first one, let's use the glass from our kitchen scene, but to make it a bit more reflective. And give it a light blue or blue-green fog color. Just a tiny bit. And set the multiplier pretty low. Right, so that's going to be the glass. Let's make sure it has the correct mat ID. Hide that. Let's make the material for the oil. Okay, so a dark diffuse color. Be like that. I'll give it some reflections. I'm gonna set the Fresnel to 1.3 for it. And make it refractive. I'm also going to use a fog color here and set it to something like oil would look like. Alright, enable effect shadows. Set the IOR to 1.3 as well. And we really have to test in the scene to see how it looks. So let's set the correct material ID and set it to 2. Alright, for the cork, I'm just gonna create a quick material. Since it's so small it won't be seen at all. I'm gonna use a cellular map in the diffuse slot. Just change the color to something like a cork would look like. Let's check the matte ID, set it to 3. And add the mapping. That's fine. Let's make it a bit smaller. Slightly reflective, reflection's pretty blurred. And Fresnel add maybe 3. And I'm going to copy the diffuse map to the bump slot and set it to -20. And that's going to be the cork. And the fourth material will be a regular chrome. Actually, I'm just gonna grab that from my espresso maker. And set the correct ID. And that's the oil bottle. Alright, let's reset the scene and create a water pitcher. So here's the reference image. And I'm gonna start with a simple profile line. Let's add the light modifier. Check it from the top view. Okay, I'm going to reduce the segment slightly. Okay, looks good. Move the center point down. I mean back. Now let's collapse it to editable poly. Okay. And now I want to shape this part so it looks a bit like the reference image. I'm going to select the vertices and use FFD 4x4 to try and do that. And I think we need to scale these down on the y-axis to make them like this. And maybe these points as well. Okay, let's collapse. Looks like we need to add another edge ring here. I'm just gonna round it out a bit. Okay, that's a good start. Let's add shell. It's pretty thick, so let's increase it a bit. And convert to editable poly. Okay, first let's edit these lower edge loops. Okay, good. Let's try turbo smoothing. That's nice. Maybe I'm going to select these vertices, add FFD 3x3, and make it a bit rounder. Okay, collapse too. And we need to create this lip on this side. Sort of like that. There's a bit of a weird transition over here. Let's round it out a bit. Might be a bit too sharp. Alright, and now let's create the handle. I'm gonna select these two vertices. I want to chamfer them. Actually, let's chamfer them one by one. The first one is smaller. And the second one can be chamfered a bit more. Maybe even like that. Okay. And let's extrude these polygons outwards. Now I'm going to delete them. Select the outline, the border. And just keep extruding it like this. And finally select both borders and bridge them together. Okay, let's see how it looks. The handle is a bit wrong. And that's fine, except for this part here. And for some reason we have a hole. Let's see, I need to weld these vertices. So something went wrong with the welding. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually select this, select these inner polys, delete them, select the border, scale it down, scale it down again, cap, and collapse the center poly. So that's fine from the bottom. I mean from the top, and from the bottom I'm gonna do the same thing. Just selecting this edge ring. Actually not working right. Convert to faces, delete. Extrude a couple of times. Cap. And collapse the poly. And that's the picture. Let's assign it the glass material. I'm going to change it to crystal by increasing the IOR. Let's increase the subdues to 12 and enable dispersion for it. Let's bring down the AB number to maybe 25 or 20. This will make the dispersions more noticeable. And that's the picture. Let's save it. And reset our scene. Actually, first I'm going to rename it to Crystal. And now save. Right, reset. And we can also make some decorative silver plates like this maybe. Or maybe even like this. Right, from the front view, let's start with a profile. this is gonna be our plate. Okay, let's increase the segments to 48. That should be enough. Maybe let's create some decorative spheres. I'm going to create a small sphere. I'll reduce the number of segments just so it doesn't create millions of polys once I revolve it around the center point. This collapse editable poly. We'll adjust the top part and move its pivot point to the center of the dish, the plate. Alright, and now using the array tool, you set the rotation totals to 360 degrees on the z-axis, enable preview, and increase the count until you get the result you like. Okay, that's good. I'm gonna make a copy of this sphere and move the polys of it to the edge here. And move upwards. And this way the pivot point stays where it was, and I can use the array tool without adjusting it again. And here I'm going to increase the number of segments. And that's fine. And that's going to be our plate. Let's give it a decorative etching in the center. So first let's make a silver material. Dark gray diffuse color, pretty reflective, maybe slightly warm reflections. Enable Fresnel, set it to 60 or so. I'm going to cheat here slightly. I'm going to reduce the reflection glossiness, the highlight glossiness, independently from the reflection glossiness. So like this. And that's going to be the basic silver. And now change the material to a multi-sub. Keep it as sub-material, set the materials to 2, and copy it to the second slot. And here in the second slot I'm going to add an etching. Alright, and to do that I'm going to use the reflect map, copy the reflect color, set up a mix map, and in the mix amount slot I'm going to use a radial profile, a radial pattern like this maybe. Okay, turn on the preview. And paste the color in the second slot and the first slot, and in the first slot make it darker. Okay, and copy now your pattern and paste an instance in the bump slot. You can also reduce the blur to 0.5 maybe. Alright, now let's select our plate, open the group, and select Edit Poly Modifier. First, let's cap the holes. And now let's select the center polygons and give them an etching. Okay, so use a new VW map. First, set the material ID to the correct one. Okay, all the rest of the object should be material ID 1 and the center should be material ID 2. And now add UV mapping. And let's preview our etching pattern. I'm going to scale it up like this. Add another edit poly. And select this edge ring around the flat edge. Convert to face. Set the ID to 2 as well. And add the UVW map. Okay, and here I'm gonna scale it up. Like that. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be. Now for these little spheres, I'm gonna make sure they have the correct mat ID. So set it to 1. And assign the material as well. So that's the plate. We're gonna use a few of these, maybe. And we can create some regular plates the same way. We can use a simple line and lathe it. You can use these regular plates to fill in the cabinets. Add lathe. Also the center, and here's your plate. And just round all the corners. Cap holes. And let's create a white porcelain material from V-Ray Fast SSS2. And just desaturate the marble preset. Alright, and give it some reflections. Enable trace reflections, increase the glossiness to 0.95 maybe. And that's good. Sorry, let's increase the IOR to 2. Okay, and this is gonna be our porcelain. Now let's make a couple of copies of these dishes. Let's make one larger. Let's make a bowl as well. weird. Let's make this part flat. Remove some of these vertices, and that's going to be a ball. Just going to smooth it a bit. Another ball, just surround her this time. Okay, so these are gonna be the basic plates we're gonna put in our cabinets. You can also make some wine glasses and stuff like that, or regular glasses. So this is gonna be a regular glass. And lathe, cap holes, it's a bit too thick, I think. And assign glass material. You can just spend some time creating some profiles for glasses, dishes and stuff. I'm not going to show you all the dishes, but they're the same basic idea. Just some profiles with the lathe modifier and a simple porcelain or glass material. Right.